Before we start, a question. When did you last skip a meal? And I don't mean the kind of skipping where you looked at your fridge, decided you weren't that hungry, and had a handful of crackers instead. I don't mean the I'm intermittent fasting kind of skip. I don't even mean the I forgot to eat lunch because work got busy kind. I mean the other kind. The kind where you opened something and it was empty. Where you lifted the lid and looked inside and then put the lid back down very carefully, because there was no point leaving it open. Where hunger wasn't a feeling you were choosing to explore. It was just the weather, just the conditions of being alive that morning. Most of you have never felt that, not the real version of it. Tonight, you will. We're going to Manchester, Northern England, 1843, and we're going to spend a morning, just a single morning, in a single room in a back-to-back terrace on a street called Angel Meadow, which is the most ironically named street in the history of human civilization. Angel Meadow. Where the houses press so close together that if two people lean out of facing windows on the upper floors, they can almost touch hands. Where the air smells of mill smoke and tallow and the river Irk, which is not really a river by this point, but more of a slow-moving agreement between standing water and industrial runoff. Where 11,000 people are packed into a space designed, and I use that word loosely, for considerably fewer. No angels, definitely no meadow. What there is, this morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, is a fire that has gone out overnight. A larder with almost nothing in it. A loaf of bread that is 3 days old and mouldy on one corner. Half a pot of coal dripping, grey and solidified, that looks like something you'd use to grease a wagon axle. And you, standing in front of all of this, 17 years old, trying to figure out how to feed 7 people. So, get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. Not the pleasant, soft darkness of a room where the curtains are drawn. This is the other kind. The total kind. The kind that has weight to it, pressing against your eyes as if the night itself is something physical, something you'd have to push through. For half a second, you lie still. The ceiling is invisible above you. The sounds of the room settle around you like water filling a vessel. Slow breathing from the bed behind you. That's your mother, and the small sharp sounds nested inside her. Breathing are your sister Agnes, 6 years old, who always sleeps with her mouth slightly open and makes a noise like a very small animal trying to climb something. Next to Agnes is Thomas, 4, and in the other bed, across the room, you can't see it but you know it's there. Your brothers William and John are stacked head to foot under a single blanket. William is 11, John is 8, your father is already gone. You knew he would be. The mills start at 5, and the walk from Angel Meadow to the Sedgwick Mill on Great Anchort Street takes 20 minutes in good weather, 30 in bad. And your father, whose name is Robert, who has a cough that started in October and has not stopped since, always leaves early, because arriving late means a fine, and a fine means less money. And less money means this morning is harder than it already is. You are lying on the floor, not because there isn't a bed. There is a bed. 2 beds, actually, both occupied. You're on the floor because you gave up your place in the big bed to your mother 6 weeks ago, when she started showing, and because you're 17, and you're the oldest, and that's simply how it works. You have a piece of sacking stuffed with straw that was probably comfortable once, maybe 15 years ago, but which now feels approximately like sleeping on a cobbled street. You've got used to it. Or you've got used to telling yourself you've got used to it, which isn't quite the same thing. The floor is cold, really cold, the kind of cold that moves upward through the sacking and into your bones with patient determination. November in Manchester is not a gentle month. The window, there is one window, a small square of glass set high in the wall, barely larger than a man's handspan, has a rim of frost on the inside. On the inside, you sit up. Your back protests. Your hands press against the boards and the boards press back, gritty with old coal dust and dried mud and whatever else, accumulates on a floor that is swept but never clean. The fire is out. You knew it would be out. You know it goes out every night because the last piece of coal goes on at around 9 when everyone goes to bed and by midnight it's ash. But knowing it in theory and discovering it at 4 in the morning are two different experiences. The grate is dark, a grey smear of cold ash. No orange glow, no warmth, nothing. You cross the room in the dark. 6 steps. You know it's 6 steps. You have walked this distance in darkness several hundred times. Past the bucket of water near the door, you'll need to check how much is left. Past the chair where your father's second jacket hangs, the one he saves for Sundays. Past the table with its 3 mismatched legs, propped level by a folded piece of leather wedged under the short corner. You kneel in front of the grate. Your fingers find the ash, cold as a stone in a riverbed, cold enough that you pull your hand back instinctively, then push it back in, searching for something in the grey. Sometimes there's a coal that holds heat through the night. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can coax a fire back from a single surviving ember, the way a tinderbox coaxes a spark into something sustainable. Your fingers find nothing, nothing alive, nothing warm, just ash and a few clinkers, the grey-white slag left when coal burns completely, useless, ugly. And the smell of old smoke that has soaked so deeply into the walls of this room that you think it would probably still smell this way if the building were demolished. You sit back on your heels. Right then. From the wooden box beside the grate, you take 3 pieces of coal. 3. You count them. Because there are not many left and today is Wednesday. And your father gets paid on Friday. And between now and Friday you have these pieces of coal and maybe 6 more. And the question of how to distribute them across the next 40-odd hours is something you've already been thinking about since yesterday. 3 pieces for this morning. To cook. To take the edge off the cold before the children wake. Under the coal. You learned this from your mother when you were young enough that learning it felt like an adventure. Like magic before you were old enough to understand what it actually meant. You lay the kindling. Scraps of wood gathered from the street. A broken handle from a broom that finally split last week. A piece of packing crate board that you found near the market on Monday and carried home under your arm, attracting no attention because everyone in this neighbourhood carries salvaged wood home under their arm. The tinderbox is on the mantelpiece, a small tin, the lid worn smooth by years of handling. Inside, a piece of charcloth, a flint, a steel striker. You strike. The sound is sharp and small in the silent room. Agnes stirs. You hold still for a moment, not breathing, willing her back to sleep. She makes a sound. Then she's quiet. You strike again. A spark lands on the charcloth, a small orange glow, fragile as a wish. You lower your face to it and blow, slowly, steadily, not too hard, not too soft, the exact pressure that coaxes and does not extinguish. The charcloth catches. You transfer it to the kindling nest. More blowing. Your knees are cold on the floor. Your back is beginning to ache in a low, persistent way. The kindling takes. A small flame, tentative, yellow-orange, casting moving shadows up the wall. You add the coal pieces carefully, one by one, settling them around the flame the way you'd settle stones around something you didn't want to disturb. The fire begins to establish itself with small cracks and pops, the coal heating and contracting, the air above it beginning, very slightly, barely perceptibly, to warm. You sit back, 5 minutes maybe, before it's making any real difference to the temperature. 15 minutes before the room starts to feel like somewhere you could take your coat off, except you're not wearing a coat. You're wearing the dress you slept in, which is also the dress you'll wear today, which is the dress you wear every day because you have 2 dresses and the other one is damp from being washed on Monday. The firelight is enough to see by now. You stand and you face the room and you take stock. 8.5 feet wide, 11 feet deep. I need you to understand what that means. Take whatever room you're in right now, your bedroom maybe, or your living room, now. Imagine that every single function that a home has to perform, sleeping, eating, cooking, washing, drying laundry, nursing children through illness, sewing, reading when there's light to read by, every single thing that a family of 7 human beings has to do to stay alive and maintain some shred of dignity, happens in a space smaller than most modern bathrooms. That is this room. It's on the ground floor of a back-to-back terrace. Back-to-back means the houses share walls on 3 sides. There is no back door, there is no back window. The only air that comes in and out comes through the front door and the one front window. The people in the house attached to your back wall are so close that on quiet nights you can hear their arguments through the plaster. The walls are brick covered in whitewash that has gone grey with age and coal smoke. The whitewash has not been renewed in at least 3 years. Your father keeps saying he'll do it, and your mother keeps not arguing with him about it, which is its own kind of argument. Near the ceiling there's a brown water stain shaped like a boot, where the roof lets in rain, which it does approximately every time it rains, which in Manchester is approximately always. The floor is wood. The boards are old and splintered, and there's a gap near the door wide enough that you can feel cold air moving upward through it in winter. You've stuffed the gap with rags. The rags don't entirely solve the problem. 2 beds, a table, 4 chairs, one of which has a cracked leg and is only used when the others are occupied. A wooden shelf on the wall above the fireplace holding 1 tin of salt, 1 jar with perhaps 2 ounces of oats at the bottom, 1 small wrapped parcel of tea. Real tea, not the cheapest kind. Something your mother insists on and your father doesn't argue about. One of the few luxuries, a tallow candle stub, a steel needle stuck into a twist of thread, a small china figurine of a shepherd that belonged to your grandmother and somehow survived everything. On the floor, the water bucket, almost empty. You check it now, crouching, peering into it. Perhaps half an inch of water at the bottom, enough to splash your face with, not enough to make porridge. Under the table, a wooden box that functions as the larder. You take it out and look inside. The bread is there. It's a small loaf, what the bakers call a quartern, about 4 pounds, and it was bought fresh on Sunday. Today is Wednesday. 3 days. You pick it up and it is hard the way wood is hard, resistant, asking your fingers what they think they're doing, squeezing it like that. The heel of the loaf, the rounded end, has gone. You know who ate it. Your brother William, yesterday, when he thought no one was looking. You didn't say anything. He's 11 and he works 6 days a week sorting waste cotton at the mill, from 6 in the morning until 7 at night. He can have the heel. The side of the loaf, though. You turn it. There it is. The mould. Not a little mould, a bloom of it, greenish-grey, soft-looking, spreading in a patch roughly the size of your palm across one side and the bottom. You lift the bread to your face and smell it, because that's what you do when you're 17 and it's 4 in the morning and you have to make a decision. The smell is sour and strange, and underneath the sourness there is something else, something that presses at the back of your throat. You set the bread on the table. You take the small knife from the shelf, the good one, the one with the wooden handle that was your father's, kept sharp because a sharp knife cuts, a blunt one tears, and in this house you want everything to work properly. And you look at the bread and you start to think. The mould. How deep does it go? This is a genuine calculation, not a metaphor, not a rhetorical device. This is you, at 4 in the morning, with the fire just beginning to take hold behind you, running through options. Option 1, cut off the mouldy part, cut deep, an inch past what you can see, and use the rest. There's an argument for this. The mould is on the surface. Most of it. If you're generous with the knife, what's left is probably fine. Probably. Your mother says probably is good enough. Your grandmother used to say that bread is bread and hunger is hunger, and don't be precious. Option 2, throw it away. The whole loaf. Start fresh. You actually laugh, quietly, with your mouth closed. Start fresh. With what money? Your father earns 9 shillings a week. This is, in 1843 Manchester, a wage. Not a good wage. In the spinning rooms, a skilled adult male can earn 12 or 14. But a wage. Something. 9 shillings a week breaks down to 1 shilling and 3p a day. 7 days. Which breaks down further when you account for rent, which is 2 shillings and 6p per week for this room, and the use of the shared privy in the yard, which leaves 6 and 6, which leaves after coal, when you can get it, and tallow and salt and the bare minimum of food, a number that's not enough. That has never in your memory been enough. Option 1 then, you cut. The knife goes in an inch past the edge of the mould. The bread is hard enough that it takes real force, pressing down with your weight behind the blade, your knuckles whitening. The mouldy section comes away. You look at what remains in your hand. About 2/3 of a loaf, most of one side, the top, the opposite heel. It's not fresh. The cut face is slightly gummy, slightly damp inside, with a faint smell that isn't quite right, but that you've learned to classify as acceptable rather than dangerous. You put it back in the wooden box. You put the mouldy section, almost a pound of bread, next to the box, because you haven't decided what to do with it yet, and you don't want to decide at 4 in the morning with the fire still finding itself. Then you find the dripping. The dripping pot is a small brown earthenware crock, lidded, sitting on the lower shelf. It goes with you everywhere this family has ever moved. It came from your grandmother's house in Salford. It is one of the oldest objects you own, and also this morning, one of the most important. Dripping is what you get when you cook meat. The fat that renders out, that pools in the pan, that solidifies when it cools into a pale yellowish substance, with a thin dark layer of meat juices at the bottom. That dark layer, the jelly, is the prize, the part with flavour. And then you collect it, and keep it, and use it. The problem with dripping is that to make it you need to have cooked meat in the first place. Your family last had meat. Actual meat. Not bone broth. Not a pig's trotter boiled until it gave up. On Sunday. A piece of belly pork. Small. Your mother had been saving the shilling it cost for 2 weeks. You roasted it in the fireplace on a bit of improvised spit made from a piece of iron, and the fat ran down and your mother collected it carefully, moving the crock in close to catch every drop. What's in the crock now is the product of that Sunday pork, plus some older layers beneath, dripping accretes, palimpsest of every piece of meat a family can afford, each layer slightly different in colour and flavour. All of it solidified overnight into something the grey-white colour of cold candle wax. You lift the lid. The smell hits you immediately. It's not a bad smell exactly. It's complex. Fat and smoke and something animal. Something that used to be alive and is now preserved in its own rendered self. There's a faint rancid note underneath, the older layers, that presses at the edges of what's acceptable. Not spoiled, not yet, but not far off. You take the kitchen knife and press it into the surface. The dripping resists, then yields further as the warmth of your hand through the handle begins to soften it. You bring a spoonful to your nose. The dark layer at the bottom, the jelly, has dried and congealed into something hard and very dark, almost black. You scrape at it with your fingernail. The jelly is the flavour. The jelly is the thing that turns dripping from something you're eating, because you have to into something that is, within its own honest category, good. Spread on bread while the bread is warm, even stale bread, even 3-day-old bread softens when it comes close to a fire. It makes a thing that is warm and savoury and filling enough. That's breakfast. That's what 7 people will eat in approximately 2 hours. But first, you need water. You take the bucket. The front door opens directly onto the narrow passage that runs between the 2 rows of back-to-back terraces, a passage 6 feet wide called the entry that is the only outdoor space most of the people in these houses have. At this hour, before 5, it's empty. Your breath makes clouds in the cold air. The November dark is absolute, only slightly softened by a slice of grey in the sky to the east that might be the beginning of dawn, or might just be the collective glow of Manchester's mills and furnaces never entirely surrendering to night. The pump is at the end of the entry, shared by 8 households, 12 if you count the cellar dwellings. There are cellar dwellings on this street. People who live below the level of the street, in rooms accessed by steps going down, where the damp comes up through the floor and the light comes down, when it comes at all, through a grate at ankle height. Where 30, 40 people sometimes share spaces smaller than what you have. You've been inside one once, you don't go back. The pump handle is cold enough to sting your palm through the thin cotton of your dress. You pump. The mechanism groans. It always groans. A deep iron complaint. The sound travelling through the metal and through your hands and up your arms. And then the water comes. And when I say the water comes, I need you to understand what that means. This is not clean water. Not drinking water, not the way you understand drinking water. The water supply for Angel Meadow in 1843 comes from the River Irk, which receives the output of approximately every tannery, dye works, slaughterhouse and privy in the northern part of Manchester. The waterworks don't filter it beyond letting it stand in reservoirs for a while, long enough for the worst of the solids to settle. The result is water that is clearish, brownish if you look carefully in a glass, and that tastes of something you learn not to identify. 14 years from now, a man named John Snow will publish a paper proving that cholera travels in contaminated water. That paper will change the world, will lead to the great sewer reforms, will eventually mean that you can turn on a tap and drink without thinking about it. In 1843, none of that has happened yet. The water fills your bucket. You can smell it faintly, even in the cold air, something mineral and organic simultaneously. You fill the bucket most of the way. You'll need to boil it, which the fire will do once it gets going properly, and boiling helps, though not as much as no one in 1843 fully understands. The walk back is 6 seconds. The bucket is heavy. The handle cuts into your palm, the metal cold and sharp at the edges where the tin has begun to rust and the edges rough. You set it down inside the door. The fire has progressed. The coal is properly alight now, a proper orange-red glow, and the room has moved from hostile to merely cold. Agnes is still sleeping. Thomas is on his back now, one arm flung out over the side of the bed, his small fingers curled. You hang the water pot over the fire. It's a small iron pot with a hook that fits over the crane. The iron arm mounted in the fireplace that swings in and out. The pot holds about a quart. You fill it from the bucket. The water will boil in perhaps 15 minutes. While you wait, you look at the oats. The jar has approximately 2 ounces of oats. You tip them into your palm. They sit there, pale and dusty, smelling faintly of grain, and you count them the way you count everything. Against need. 7 people. No, 6. Your father has already gone. 6 people then. 2 ounces of oats. Your mother, who is 5 months pregnant and has been too nauseous to eat properly for weeks. Agnes, 6. Thomas, 4. William, 11. John, 8. You. 2 ounces of oats and most of a stale loaf and half a crock of dripping. This is not a crisis. In the spectrum of mornings you have experienced, this is a moderate morning. There have been worse. There was a week in January 2 winters ago when the mill shut for repairs and your father had no wages for 6 days and you ate bread, real bread, a whole fresh loaf, only on Monday, and then went 4 days on oatmeal thinned with so much water it was barely thicker than soup. This morning is not that morning. This morning you have dripping, and you have enough bread for everyone to have a piece, and if you make the porridge thin and put it in the bowl first and let it be the main thing, the bread and dripping is the good part, the reward, the thing that ends the meal on a note that feels like almost enough. But 2 ounces for 6 people means the porridge is already decided. Thin, gruel adjacent. You'll add water until the oats are more of a suggestion than a substance, and then you'll add a pinch of salt because salt is cheap and because it makes the bland palatably savoury, and you'll stir it until it coats the spoon, and then you'll stir it some more. Your mother always says that stirring is the difference between porridge and wallpaper paste. That porridge has to breathe, that you have to work it, keep it moving, not let it sit and seize. Your mother learned to cook from your grandmother, who learned to cook in a farmhouse in Cheshire, where they had their own milk cow and a kitchen garden, and the kind of poverty that is not quite the same as this poverty. That poverty had more space, more growing things, more hope of a good season changing things. This poverty has no seasons. The mills run regardless of weather. The rent is due regardless of weather. The hunger works the same in summer and winter, except in summer you don't also have to choose between buying food and buying coal. You pour the oats into the iron pot, which has not yet boiled. The oats will cook in the same water. Boiling first, then the oats, stirring constantly. Approximately 20 minutes from now. You have time. You sit in the chair closest to the fire. Your father's chair, technically, the one with a better cushion, which is stuffed with horsehair and has gone flat and uneven over years of use, but which is still better than the others. And you pull your dress tighter, and you think. there is the bread question still unresolved. The good portion, the 2/3 you cut away from the mould, is enough for 6 thin slices, 1 each, more or less. But thin slices from a hard loaf are not filling. They are at best a vehicle for the dripping, which is where the actual nourishment is. The fat, the calories, the thing that sticks to your ribs and makes your body feel like it has something to work with. The dripping, you do the same accounting. The crock is perhaps 1/3 full. If you spread it generously, the way your father would, the way William would if you let him serve himself, the thick, impractical layer of a man who still has the childhood habit of thinking there will always be more, it runs out. If you spread it thinly, carefully, using the knife to work it into the bread, pressing the fat into the crumbs so it seems like more than it is, it's enough. You will spread it thinly. Nobody will say anything. They know the way of things. Even Thomas knows at 4 years old not to ask for more when you've set out everything there is, except that 2/3 of a stale loaf is not enough. Not really. Not with 6 people and a day ahead of them that will take everything they have. So you need more bread. You need to go out. The bread shops on Angel Meadow open early. Earlier than early. The bakers themselves have been working since midnight, or earlier some of them, and by 3 in the morning the first loaves are out of the oven, and by 4 the doors are open for the first customers who will be at the mill gates by 5 and need to eat before then. Day-old bread costs half what fresh bread costs. Day-old in the bread shops means yesterday's bread, the loaves that weren't sold during the previous day's trading, that have spent a night on the shelf going from warm and yielding to cool and firm, not stale, not the 3-day hardness of what you have at home, just yesterday. One day less perfect than fresh, but one day cheaper, and cheaper is what this morning needs. There's a baker on Rochdale Road, Thomas Hemming, who keeps his day-old loaves in a wooden crate near the door. If you're there early enough, before 6, before the full rush of mill workers' families descends, you can usually get a half loaf, £1.50 for £1.50. You have £1.50. You have, in a small knotted cloth in your dress pocket, 3p and a farthing, which is everything that remains from your mother's housekeeping allocation, and which is supposed to also buy potatoes today for tonight's supper. So the calculation is £1.50 for bread, leaving a penny 3/4 for the potatoes, which will not buy very many potatoes, but will buy enough if you go to the right stall at the right time of day. You stir the porridge. The oats have begun to swell, absorbing the water, thickening. You stir in a slow circle, the wooden spoon dragging through the pale mass, and you listen to it bubble. A soft, plopping, methodical sound, each bubble rising to the surface and bursting with a small exhale of steam. The room is warmer now, properly warm near the fire, merely cold everywhere else. The window shows a faint lightening, grey, unpromising, the particular diluted light of a November morning in an industrial city, where the smoke from 1,000 coal fires has mixed with the natural cloud into a single, unified overcast that will last until spring. You ladle a portion of the porridge into the largest bowl and set it near the fire to keep warm. Then you put on your shawl, the grey woolen one, heavy and slightly scratchy. That was your mother's before she gave it to you when her belly got too big to wrap it properly. And you unlatch the door. The street is dark and alive. Both of those things at once. That's the thing about poor neighbourhoods at 4 in the morning. They're not quiet. The silence is for people who can afford to sleep longer. The entry is crowded with other figures, women mostly, moving through the pre-dawn dark with the purposeful economy of people who have done this route in every weather and every degree of tiredness. No lanterns. Lanterns cost money to fuel. Just the faint ambient glow from windows, the blue-grey light of early morning beginning to establish itself, and the knowledge of the streets that is more reliable than any lamp. The mud of the entry is hard this morning. The temperature has been just cold enough overnight to put a crust on the surface of the mud, a fragile topsoil of frozen grime that crunches under your feet and then gives way in unexpected patches where the cold hasn't quite reached. Your shoes are not waterproof. They're leather, once good, resoled twice, with a crack in the left heel that lets in water if you step in anything deeper than a puddle. You've developed an unconscious mapping of the worst patches, and you navigate around them by memory. Rochdale Road is 3 streets north and then right. The smells of the street accumulate as you walk. From the open doorway of one house, cooked onions and something fatty, someone's fire going already, breakfast underway. From the gutter, the long-term archaeological deposit of everything a street produces when there is no daily removal system. The night soil men come twice a week. Tonight was not their night. From a stable yard you pass, horses and hay and old manure, a smell that is somehow almost clean compared to the rest of it, pastoral and strange in this urban context. From above you, faint but persistent, the cold smoke of 1,000 fires and the particular industrial overscent of the mills, which burn coal in furnaces the size of rooms to drive the steam engines that drive the looms, the smell of the Industrial Revolution itself, which is the smell of the 19th century happening all around you all the time. You've stopped smelling it. That's the thing. You're 17, and you've lived here your whole life, and the smell of Angel Meadow is not a smell to you anymore. It's just the air. It's just what breathing is. The way no one who grew up by the ocean thinks the sea smells of the sea. Other people smell it. You know this because visitors from outside Manchester, from the countryside, from other cities, will stop short on the Rochdale Road and put their handkerchief to their face with an involuntary expression of distress. A man came here once, a reformer, a man from London writing something for a newspaper, and you saw him from the window as he walked down the street, and you saw exactly the moment the smell of the street reached him. His step faltered. He looked up. He kept walking. He wrote his article. Things didn't change very much. The baker's is ahead. You can see the light even from here, a warm, yellow-orange glow from the low window. The light of a fire and candles combined, the most welcoming sight in the whole cold grey street. You can smell it too, now that you're within range, yeast and hot crust and something sweet underneath, and your body responds to this information with a clenching urgency that is not quite hunger, because hunger is the background, the constant, but is something more specific and immediate, something that says, warm food exists near here. Move. The door to Thomas Hemming's bakery is set 2 steps below street level, because the shop occupies a semi-basement, the ground floor raised above it. You go down the 2 steps and push the door. The bell above it rings, small and clear and slightly cracked. The same bell that has rung on this door for the 8 years since Hemming opened the shop. The heat hits. You first. After the cold of the street, after the frozen mud and the grey November air, the heat of the bakery is an almost violent sensation, pressing against your face, filling your lungs with something warm and yeast-laden and dense. The inside of your nose tingles with the sudden change. Your cold, stiffened fingers begin immediately to loosen and ache with the return of circulation. The room is small, low ceiling, thick with the ambient heat of the ovens that occupy the back third of the space. Flagstone floor, white with flour dust that gets into everything. A wooden counter scarred by decades of bread pans and flour sacks and the knives of customers cutting off test pieces to check the crumb. Thomas Hemming himself is behind the counter. He is a compact man, 50s, red-faced from decades of oven heat, with flour in the creases of his neck and hands that look like they've been shaped specifically for kneading. Thick, wide-palmed, with fingers that are permanently slightly curved. He's been up since midnight. He'll be up until the shop closes at noon, and then he'll sleep for 4 hours, and then he'll be up again to start the evening sponge for tomorrow's bread. He's been a baker since he was 12 years old. He looks up when you come in. Not a warm look exactly, not unfriendly. The look of a man who has seen several hundred customers this morning already, and has approximately 3,700 more emotional calculations to make before noon. "Morning," he says. "Morning," you say. You look toward the wooden crate near the door. The day-old. The crate has several loaves and some rolls and a couple of the flat, dense things he calls penny fancies, which are not fancy and cost a penny halfpenny, and which are yesterday's bread shaped into small rounds so they look like something different. There's a problem. The woman ahead of you. You didn't notice her until just now in the corner near the shelves because she was standing very still. The woman ahead of you has the last full half loaf in her hand. She's turning it over, examining it with the careful attention of someone who's also doing mathematics this morning. She looks up. Her eyes meet yours. She is older than you, 40 maybe. She has the kind of face that exhaustion has remade in its own image. The lines around the mouth not from smiling, the hollows under the eyes not from illness, just from the accumulated deficit of years of early mornings and insufficient sleep. She's wearing a coat over a dress, the coat thin at the elbows. You both look at the loaf in her hand. You both look at the crate, which now contains 3 rolls, one slightly burnt at the bottom, 2 penny fancies, no full loaves. "That's the last," Hemming says from behind the counter, not unkindly, stating a fact. The woman looks at the half loaf, looks at you. There is a conversation happening between you that does not involve any words. You both know what the other one needs. You both know there is 1 loaf. "I've got 6 children," the woman says. Not to you, to the room, or to no one in particular, or maybe to Hemming, or maybe to God, with the tone of someone who has said something so many times that it has stopped being a plea and started being a fact. "You have 6 people. I can take the rolls," you say, "if you take the loaf." The woman looks at you. The look shifts. Something passes across her face that is not quite gratitude and is not quite relief. It's more complicated than either. It's the look of someone who has been bracing for a fight they didn't want to have and has found instead that the fight isn't happening, and who now doesn't know what to do with the energy they were holding ready. "You sure?" she asks. "I need bread," you say. "The rolls will do." They won't entirely. 3 rolls between 6 people is even thinner than what you had before. But you're looking at her coat, at the elbows, at the way she's holding the loaf. 3 rolls, Hemming says. Penny farthing. You count out the coins. A penny and a farthing. The small copper disc almost weightless in your palm. He takes it. He wraps the rolls in a piece of paper that is already used. Yesterday's wrapping from something else. reused, because paper is not nothing. Paper costs something, and he hands them over. The woman with the loaf is already out the door. You follow her into the cold. The rolls are warm in the paper, not hot. They've been sitting since yesterday. They're not warm the way fresh bread is warm. But the paper traps some of the ambient heat of the shop, and your hands receive it gratefully. You eat one of the rolls walking home. You don't decide to. It just happens. Your hands make the decision before your mind has signed off on it. You're 3 steps from the baker's door, the paper parcel under your arm, and your right hand simply reaches in and breaks off a piece and puts it in your mouth. It's good. Not amazing. Not the warm, yielding luxury of bread fresh from the oven. But it's bread. It's substantial. The yeast smell is still there if you breathe through your nose while you chew, and the chewing itself is an enormous physical relief after the hours since last night's supper. You eat half the roll, then you stop. You count what you have. 2 full rolls remaining, 2 penny fancies. Back home, most of a stale loaf, the porridge on the fire, 5 people. Your mother won't want much. Her appetite has been unreliable for weeks. A few spoonfuls of porridge and a piece of bread, that's usually it. Agnes and Thomas are small. William and John eat like they're trying to fill a ship's hold. The arithmetic is tight, as always, but it works. It works if you give your mother a roll and the bread and dripping. It works if the boys get the stale bread, which they'll eat anything. And you split the porridge into 6 portions and accept that a portion is a small bowl and not a large one. You fold the paper back over the remaining rolls. The street is lighter now. The grey November dawn has arrived in its full, underwhelming character, a flat, diffuse, directionless light that makes everything look slightly bleached. People are moving in numbers now. Mill workers, mostly. The shift change underway, men and women and children in flat caps and shawls moving with the rapid, fixed destination gait of people who cannot afford to be late. You know some of their faces, not their names, most of them. The woman from the end of your row who has a long scar on her neck from a loom accident 3 years ago. The man with the beard who lives above the chandler's shop and whose wife died in August, and whose 3 small children were sent to relatives in Stockport last month. The girl can't be more than 9, who runs with a gang of other children to the finishing sheds, where they work the heat and the noise and the fluff for 12 hours and come home grey with cotton dust. 9 years old. That girl is 9 years old. In 40 years there will be laws. Acts of Parliament limiting working hours for children, mandating minimum ages, requiring some modicum of schooling, factory inspectors with clipboards and the authority to fine employers. In 1843, there are some laws. The Factory Act of 1833 tried to limit children under 9 from working in textile mills, tried to require 2 hours of schooling a day for those between 9 and 13. The problem was enforcement. The inspectors were few. The mill owners were resourceful. The families were desperate, which meant that if the mill owner looked the other way and the inspector didn't visit today, the family would decide that their 8-year-old was really 9, and everyone knew it and nobody said anything. The girl running past you is 9. If that. You watch her go. Then you turn the corner into your entry and you go home. The porridge has gone past where you wanted it. You can see it from the doorway. The colour has deepened from pale grey to a more committed grey, and the surface has the thick, slightly glazed look of the oats that have been sitting on a fire for too long without stirring. You cross the room in 3 quick steps and pick up the wooden spoon and work the porridge in fast circles, scraping the bottom where it's stuck. Not ruined, Not quite, but thick. Much thicker than you intended, and where it's caught on the bottom there's a dark layer that will taste scorched. You add water from the bucket, carefully, just a small amount, tilting the dipper and adding it in a thin stream while you stir, watching the porridge loosen and release. Return to something salvageable. The scorched bits on the bottom stay on the bottom. You leave them. You work the good porridge away from the bad and tell yourself this is fine, and it more or less is. Agnes is awake. You didn't hear her wake. She's simply there, sitting up in the bed with her hair in absolute chaos around her head, a 6-year-old girl looking at you with the grave seriousness of children who are not yet awake enough to remember how to be cheerful. "Is breakfast?" she asks. "Nearly," you say. "Porridge?" "Yes." She considers this. "Can I have honey?" This is something she asks every morning. It has never been yes. There is no honey. There has not been honey in this house since before Thomas was born. "Not today," you say, in exactly the same voice you say it every day. She nods, accepting this with the philosophical resignation that children in these circumstances develop early. She slides out of bed, landing on the floor with a small thud, and pads across to the chamber pot in the corner. Thomas is awake now too, roused by his sister's movement. He sits up and stares at the room with the expression of a child who has just remembered where he is and has complex feelings about it. "Cold," he announces. "There's a fire," you say. He looks at the fire. He looks at the distance between himself and the fire. He does not move. He sits in the bed with the blanket around him and watches Agnes take care of her morning business with the disinterested intensity of a very young child who has not yet developed any concept of privacy. You begin to serve the porridge. The bowls are 4, you only have 4, and one of them is chipped in a way that creates a small rough edge on the inside that catches on your lip if you're not careful, and one is slightly too small, so whoever gets it gets the least, and you give the small one to yourself without thinking about it, because this is a kind of calculation you make automatically. Your mother is awake. She's been awake, you realise, for a while. She's sitting up in the bed, the blanket pulled around her shoulders, watching you. She has the look she has most mornings now, a careful stillness, as if moving too fast might disturb something. Her hair is loose and going grey at the temples in a way that happened very quickly, you think. You didn't notice the grey until last winter, and now it's clearly there, threads of it through the dark brown. She's 38 years old. She looks 50. Not because she's poorly. She isn't. Not exactly. The pregnancy's going normally, the midwife said so. But because she is a woman who has been working since she was 8 and has had 7 children, 2 of whom did not survive infancy, a fact that sits in this house like furniture, present and not discussed, and whose body carries all of that the way a building carries its history, in the marks and worn places and the adjustments made to bear the weight. "Good morning," she says. "Morning, ma'am," you say. "Porridge." "I can see." You bring a bowl first. It's the biggest bowl, a decision so automatic you don't think about it. She wraps her hands around it and the warmth goes through her palms and you can see it. The way her shoulders settle, just slightly, just a fraction, into something less held. "How much bread left?" she asks. "I went out," you say. "Got rolls from Hemmings?" "Rolls." She considers this. "Day old?" "Yesterday's." "Good girl." She says it without emphasis, without the performance of gratitude that isn't needed between the two of you. Just fact, recognition, a small node of approval in a morning that requires constant small decisions. You go back to the fire. The boys are awake now. You can hear William's voice from the other bed, low and gruff. He has developed, in the last year, a voice that is trying very hard to be a man's voice and is about halfway there, saying something to John about needing the chamber pot. John's voice, still fully a child's voice, responding. The blanket on their bed shifts and heaves. You stir the porridge again. Small motion. Keep it moving. Keep it alive. Outside, the church bells of St. Michael's begin to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. No, 4 times. 4:30 already. An hour before William needs to be at the mill gates. 45 minutes before John needs to be at the charity school on Shude Hill that he attends 3 days a week. The days when there's no work he can do at the rag shop, where he supplements the family income by sorting and bundling old cloth for a halfpenny a morning. Half a penny. For 3 hours of work, breathing rag dust in a building with no windows. Half a penny is 1/3 of a cup of oats. Half a penny is a piece of coal. Half a penny is a transaction that keeps this family's accounting from collapse, multiplied across every day and every small contribution, until at the end of the week the sums just barely add up, just barely reach the point where rent is paid and coal is bought and everyone has eaten something every day. Just barely. Never more than barely. You take the bread, the stale 2/3 loaf, and you begin to slice it. The knife against the hard bread makes a sound like sawing wood. You have to angle the blade and use a slight sawing motion, back and forth, rather than pressing straight down, because the bread is hard enough to resist a direct cut. The slices come off uneven. You've never quite mastered the uniform slice, always a little thicker on one end, tapering. But in this kitchen, no one comments on the geometry of their bread. 6 slices. Thin. The bread barely yields as you cut. It's dense and close-grained, the crumb barely springing at all when you press it. You set the slices near the fire. This is the transformation part. The thing your mother taught you when you were small enough to watch from a height that meant the table was at eye level. Heat old bread, and it becomes something else. Not fresh. Nothing makes it fresh again, but softer, pliable. The crust, which was dry and slightly bitter-tasting cold, becomes something close to digestible. The crumb releases a faint warmth that tricks the mouth into experiencing it as newly made. 5 minutes near the fire, turn them once. While they warm, you open the dripping crock. In the firelight, the dripping is beginning to soften at the edges. The solidified surface has developed a slight sheen, a tiny gloss of liquidity. You take the knife and begin to work it, pressing the flat of the blade against the surface, using it as a spreader rather than a cutter, working the fat into a texture soft enough to apply to bread. The smell intensifies with the warmth. Fat and smoke and the ghost of Sunday's pork, the faint savoury undertone of the dark jelly layer. You take the first warmed slice of bread and apply the dripping. Not a thick layer, not the lavish spread of the well-fed. A careful application, enough to darken the surface of the bread, enough that when you press the bread, the fat gives slightly and wicks into the crumb. You work it to the edges, to the crust, covering the surface as evenly as you can. The result is something glistening, slightly amber where the fat has met the warmth of the bread, dark in the groove where the jelly has distributed itself. You give this slice to your mother. She looks at it. She looks at you. You? She says. I ate at the baker's, you say, a half-truth. You ate half a roll. Enough. She eats. The sounds of the room normalise around the breakfast sounds. The scrape of spoon against bowl. The small satisfied sounds of children eating. the fire's steady commentary. Agnes has her porridge and is eating it with the deliberate seriousness of a child who takes food as it should be taken, not dawdling, not playing. Thomas is doing something with his porridge that involves creating a small mountain in the centre of the bowl and then excavating it, but he's eating it, so you say nothing. William eats fast. He always eats fast, the way people eat when they're not entirely sure there will be more. He's finished his porridge before Thomas has reached the base of his mountain, and he's looking at the bread. You hand him the bread, and dripping without a word, he takes it. He eats it in 3 bites. John gets his more slowly. He chews methodically. He's the careful one, always has been. And then you sit with your bowl, the small one, the chipped one, and you eat. The porridge is thick and plain, and there's a slight caught taste at the back of it from the bottom of the pot. But it's hot and it's something, and the bread roll you broke open has some dripping on it now. You applied the last of what was in the knife to the roll without really accounting for it, and you eat that too, slowly, making it last. For maybe 8 minutes, nobody talks. The fire pops, the bowls move, the sounds of eating in a small room in a cold house, in a city that never entirely quiets. William goes first. He washes his face from the water bucket, the same brownish water you carried from the pump, splashing it on with his hands and rubbing quickly, shaking his head like a dog. He puts on his jacket, a man's jacket too big for him, bought from a second-hand stall because it was what could be afforded, belted at the waist with a piece of rope to keep it from swallowing him. He puts on his cap. He looks, in this moment, so much like your father that it stops you somewhere inside, a small stoppage, a catch. The same jaw, the same set of the eyes, the same expression of contained determination that your father has when he's about to face something he'd rather not face but knows must be faced. William is 11 years old. I'll be back at 7, he says. That's the evening. 13 hours from now, he'll walk the 20 minutes to the mill, work the looms for 12 hours in a room where the air is thick with cotton fluff, and the noise of the machinery is loud enough to make thinking impossible, and then he'll walk home. He'll be hungry. Whatever is for supper had better be enough. I know, you say. He leaves without touching you, stops at the door for a moment with his hand on the latch, and he says very quietly, to the door rather than to the room, "It's a good breakfast." Then he's gone. You stare at the closed door for a moment. Then you start cleaning up. John takes longer, as he always does, his movements deliberate and slightly dreamy. A child who exists in the world at approximately 3/4 of its speed. He ties his shoes wrong and has to retie them. He puts on his cap and then takes it off to scratch his head and forgets to put it back on and has to be reminded. His school days, the 3 days a week at the Shude Hill Charity School, are the days he seems least burdened, and you can see it in the way he moves, the slightly looser quality of a boy going somewhere that doesn't threaten him. Will there be bread left for dinner, he asks. I don't know, you say honestly. He considers this with the equanimity of someone who's learned that the answer is often no. All right, he says. He goes. The room is quiet now. Agnes and Thomas are playing something on the floor near the fire. A game that seems to involve sorting small stones they've brought in from the entry, placing them in patterns with the gravity of people engaged in serious architecture. Your mother has gone back to the bed, not sleeping, just resting, her hands folded on her belly, looking at the ceiling with the thoughtful expression she's been wearing more and more in the last weeks. You collect the bowls. The eating is done in minutes. The cleaning takes longer. The bowls have to be rinsed with what water remains in the bucket, wiped out with the cloth hung on the nail by the fireplace, stacked back on the shelf. The pot has to be dealt with. The stuck porridge on the bottom requiring sustained attention with the wooden spoon and then the cloth, scraping and soaking and scraping again, the scorched layer eventually yielding mostly. Your hands in the cold water are reddening. The knuckles have been chapped since September. They crack in dry, cold air, and in wet, cold air they stay red and sore, and the skin on your palms has thickened in the places where it catches on rough surfaces. The bucket handle, the rough texture of the old hemp sacking, the edge of the coal box. You're 17. Your hands are 35. This happens to everyone here. It happens to everyone you know. The bodies of the people in this neighbourhood are not the bodies of people in the better parts of Manchester. The new terraces further out, where the cotton merchants and mill owners live, where the windows are larger and the air is cleaner and the food is different in every way that matters. Those people have hands that stay soft because they don't put them in cold water and hard surfaces for 12 hours a day. Those people's children grow taller, have fewer missing teeth, live longer. The data on this is actually quite precise. By 1843, Edwin Chadwick published his report on the sanitary condition of the labouring population of Great Britain in 1842, 1 year ago, and it contained numbers that should have made the government move immediately and decisively, and in fact made them move slowly and partially and with considerable resistance from people who didn't want to spend money on the poor. The average age of death for labourers in Manchester, 28 years old. Not a typo. 28. 30 years below the equivalent figure for gentry and professional classes in the same city. Same streets nearly. Same city. Different worlds. The infant mortality rate in the cellar dwellings of Angel Meadow was in some years above 50%. Half the children born in those rooms didn't make it to 5. You scrub the pot. The fire settles behind you. Agnes arranges her stones with total concentration. There is, when you look at what's left, still the mouldy section. You've been not looking at it since you cut it away this morning, setting it to one side, letting the question defer itself. But now the morning is mostly done and you're standing at the table and it's there, the wrong side of a loaf, with its bloom of green-grey, its slightly collapsed surface. You pick it up. The smell is strong now that you're attending to it, definitively wrong. The kind of wrong that is past the point of generous interpretation. And here is the thing. Here is the thing that people don't talk about in polite company in 1843. That is not in Chadwick's report because it's not something that poor people tell to men with clipboards from London. Poor people in 1843 eat mouldy bread. Not all of it. Not if there's an alternative. But when there is no alternative, when the mould hasn't gone entirely through, when it's surface mould on old bread and the inside is still structurally bread-shaped and not liquid, they eat it. You cut off what you can, you eat the rest. You don't talk about it. Sometimes it makes you sick. Stomach cramps and a day of misery, and your mother's voice saying, "Drink the hot water, drink the hot water." Sometimes nothing happens at all, and you wonder if the mould was a problem, or if you were wrong to worry. The science of this will take decades to establish. The penicillium mould that colonizes bread can be toxic, or can be neutral depending on the species, and in 1843 nobody knows any of this. What they know is, cut off what looks bad and hope. You take the knife, you cut deeper into the mouldy section, 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres, cut until the bread you're holding is entirely white inside, shows no green, smells only of old bread and not of something else. What you're left with is about half a small roll's worth, a handful. You eat it standing at the table in 4 bites, looking out the window at the grey morning street, chewing carefully, tasting nothing wrong in it, swallowing and waiting a moment as if your body will give you an immediate verdict, which it doesn't. Fine. You brush the crumbs into your palm and put them back in the wooden box, and you wash your hands in the bucket, and you decide the morning's food decisions are done. By 8 o'clock, the church bells marking it clearly, the bells of St. Michael's and St. Patrick's and the smaller bells of the chapel on the Oldham Road, a symphony of timekeeping that is the city's way of making sure everyone knows exactly how late they are. The street outside has transformed. The pre-dawn rush of mill workers is over. The street has settled into its daytime character, which is entirely different. Vendors have established themselves along the pavement. A woman with a basket of apples, wind-bruised and small, selling 3 for a halfpenny. A man with a barrow of coal, calling it out in a voice that carries to the upper floors. A girl, maybe 13, selling watercress from a flat basket balanced on her head, her voice high and practised. Fresh watercress, penny a bunch, fresh watercress. A knife grinder pushing his wheel, the whine of blade on stone cutting through everything else, and the smell of food, not from restaurants or cafes. Those words belong to another part of Manchester, another economic stratum. But from the vendor who has set up a brazier on the corner and is cooking something in a large black pan that involves onions and fat, the smell coming off it in waves that are almost visible in the cold air. From the pie shop 2 doors down from Hemmings, which does not open until 9 but whose ovens are going already, the heat coming through the walls and warming the air outside. From someone's kitchen somewhere above you, the window cracked, a smell of something boiling, grey meat probably, cheap cuts making the best of themselves in a long simmer. This is the smell of a poor neighbourhood at breakfast time. It's not an unpleasant smell. It has in fact a quality that is almost intensely alive. The concentrated smell of hundreds of families doing exactly what you were doing an hour ago, making the most of what they have, extracting maximum sustenance from minimum resources, the economy of the poor expressed entirely in smell. You go out to get the potatoes. The Smithfield market, where the vegetable sellers come, is a 15-minute walk from Angel Meadow down Miller Street and left on Thomas Street, and by 8 in the morning it has been running for 3 hours. It is raining now, not heavily. The particular Manchester drizzle that is not quite rain and not quite nothing, a pervasive, fine, lateral wet that doesn't fall so much as inhabit the air. Within a minute of leaving the house you can feel it on your face, beading on your shawl, working its way into your hair. The shawl is wool, and wool does something useful in light rain. It absorbs the moisture into the fibres and holds it and keeps you warm anyway, a property that is one of the reasons wool has been the primary poor person's fabric for centuries, and will remain so for decades more. You wrap it closer and walk. The market is noise and colour and the specific chaos of commercial activity under pressure. Stalls run the length of the covered section, wooden trestles loaded with produce, carrots still muddy from the fields they came in from, parsnips, onions, cabbages. The season for most things is nearly done. What's here is the late season end of harvest, things that keep, roots, cabbages, and things that have come from further afield, from market gardens south of the city that supply Manchester through the year. The potato seller is at the East End, where she is always, a stout woman called Mrs. Whitley, who sells from a sack that she refills from a cart that her husband manages from somewhere in the back. She knows you by sight. You know her by transaction. There is no warmth between you and no coldness. This is a commercial relationship stripped of all embellishment. Two people who appear in each other's lives for the purpose of exchanging a small amount of money for a small amount of potatoes. Pound of potatoes, you say. She looks at you, at the state of your shawl, damp at the edges, at your hands. Penny 3, she says. Penny farthing, you say. This is the haggling. It lasts approximately 30 seconds, and it happens every single time, and the final price is always somewhere in the middle, and you both know it, and it still happens because this is how the market works. Penny halfpenny, she says. Done, you say. She scoops potatoes from the sack, small ones. There are large potatoes and small potatoes, and the large ones cost more per pound, for the entirely rational reason that large potatoes are better for eating, and small potatoes are better for regretting. But small potatoes, boiled whole, are still potatoes. They are still starch and substance, and something hot and filling for tonight's supper, cooked in the same iron pot with the same water, and served with the last of the dripping if there's any left. She wraps them in a piece of newspaper. You take them. The newspaper is from last week. You can see the date at the top, November 6th, 1843. And the headline that happens to be face up as you walk, the paper wrapped around your potatoes, reads something about the railway, and something about the Corn Laws, and something about an address to Parliament. The Corn Laws. You know about the Corn Laws. Everyone in this neighbourhood knows about the Corn Laws, because the Corn Laws are the reason bread costs what it costs, and bread is the thing your breakfast is built on. The Corn Laws are tariffs, taxes on imported grain. They were introduced in 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars, to protect English farmers by making imported grain expensive, which kept the price of domestic grain, and therefore bread, artificially high. High bread prices. Think about what that means in this neighbourhood. The Anti-Corn Law League, which was actually founded in Manchester, right here, 4 years ago, in 1839, by men like Richard Cobden and John Bright, the league that will eventually win and get the laws repealed in 1846. The league has been saying for years that high bread prices are killing the poor. That what the Corn Laws amount to is the landed gentry protecting their profits by making the poor pay more for the thing that keeps them alive. You're holding the evidence in your hands, literally. The newspaper around your potatoes is describing the debate about this exact issue in Parliament. Right now, at this moment, men in London are arguing about the price of bread. While you bought 3 rolls and cut the mould off a loaf and made porridge out of 2 ounces of oats to feed 6 people, you walk home. By mid-morning, you've done the washing. There is no wash house in this building. There is no copper, the large iron vessel for boiling laundry that slightly better off working families have, that makes washing more than a cold water ordeal. There is you, and there is the bucket, and there is a piece of soap that is nearly gone, a grey nub of something that barely lathers in cold water, and there is the wringing out by hand and the draping over the chair, and the knowledge that in this weather, on this day with no sun and this damp air, the laundry will not be dry by evening. The laundry is your mother's and Agnes's and Thomas's clothes, the small things that need regular washing, the cloths your mother uses, Thomas's breeches that have not survived the morning unscathed in ways you don't need to detail, a pair of stockings, your own dress, because you have the other one dried from Monday now, you can switch. The cold water reddens your hands further. You work the soap into the fabric with your knuckles, rubbing, pressing, the motion that does most of the cleaning work in the absence of heat, and then rinse and wring. The wringing is the hardest part. Your hands ache with it. The grip required to squeeze the water from a piece of fabric when that fabric is cold stiff, and your hands are also cold and stiff. The small tendons in your fingers protest. This is work. This is not a choice or a consideration. This is the labour that keeps children in clean clothes and keeps the room from filling with the compounding smell that happens when laundry is neglected. Your mother from the bed watches you do it. I should be, she starts. No, you say. She's silent. The midwife said, you say. Not unkindly, just, this is the information, and it closes the conversation. Your mother's name is Ellen. She's been doing this work, this exact work, this precise set of early morning tasks, since she was younger than you, since she was 12 or 13 in a house not very different from this one. A daughter in a family very like this family in a city that was already then a city that consumed people. She gave this work to you gradually, over years, as you got older and she got more pregnant and more tired, a transfer of responsibility that happened without a formal conversation, just the daily adjustment of who does which thing, until one day the balance had shifted and it was you at the fire at 4 a.m. and her resting. She watches you wring out the breeches and her expression is something you can't entirely read. Gratitude, probably. Grief, maybe. A little. The grief of a woman who knows what this work costs and has given it to her daughter because there was no other option. Something that might be pride if there's room for pride in this morning. You're a good girl, she says. I know, you say. It's not arrogance, it's just, you do know. You know you get up at 4, you know you keep count of the coal, you know the potatoes, you know. At 10:30, there is a knock at your door. Not a confident knock, a hesitant one. 2 taps, light, as if the person doing the knocking is considering stopping after the first and has committed to the second only reluctantly. You open it. The woman standing in the entry is Mary Booth from number 7, which is 4 doors down and 1 row over, and she's 26 years old and she looks 40, and she's holding a child on her hip in the particular way of women whose arms have been doing this so long it has become a kind of structural integration, the child and the body merging into a single unit of weight and motion. The child is not moving, not asleep. You can see from the child's eyes, open, directed at some middle distance, that she's not asleep. She's 2 years old, maybe 2.5. Her face is pale in a way that goes past the ordinary winter pallor of children in this neighbourhood, a whiteness that is not healthy. I need to ask, Mary says. She's looking not quite at you, but slightly to the side, which is what people do when they need something and hate needing it. I need to ask if you've got anything for a child. You look at the child. What's wrong with her, you ask? She won't eat. 3 days. Mary shifts the child on her hip, won't take the breast any more, won't take anything. You look at the child again. 3 days without eating for a 2-year-old. 3 days. The child's wrists, where they emerge from the blanket wrapped around her, are very thin. The wrists of a child who has been feeding from reserves already depleted. Come in, you say. Mary comes in. Your mother sits up in the bed and takes one look, and her face does the thing it does when she's making a fast assessment. Eyes narrowing slightly, lips pressing together, the calculation of someone who has seen this before and knows what it means. Sit, your mother says. Mary sits. The child on her lap stares at the middle distance. How much milk have you got? Your mother asks. Not much, Mary says. I've been trying to keep it coming, but she stops. The sentence doesn't need finishing. You can see the rest of it in her face. You keep milk coming by eating. She's not eating enough. Her milk is thinning. Your mother is looking at you. You go to the wooden box. There is the remaining bread. There are the potatoes. There is almost nothing else. But there is, at the back of the shelf, a small jar that you'd forgotten, that you'd not accounted for in this morning's inventory, because it's been there so long it has become invisible. A jar of condensed oats, the very bottom of an older oat supply, maybe a tablespoon's worth, hardened into a solid disc. And there is the dripping. You take them both. If you warm the crock, your mother says from the bed to Mary, and add a little water and work it, she might take it from a cloth. The fat, if it's warm enough, she might take it. Mary looks at the dripping. Back at your mother. Her face is doing something complicated. We can spare some, you say, before she can speak, before the refusal or the gratitude, before any of it. Take it. You portion out half the dripping, the good half, the surface layer with the most of the jelly still present, into a smaller clay dish you have, a thing that used to hold mustard and now holds whatever needs holding. You add the oats on top. You wrap it in the paper the potatoes came in. You hold it out. Mary takes it. She's looking at her hands. I don't know how I'll... She starts. Don't, you say. She looks up. My mother had a neighbour in Salford, you say. When we were very small, she brought us bread once when there was nothing. You stop. That's all. Mary nods. Something in her face settles. Not entirely, but enough. She goes. You close the door. You stand with your back to it for a moment and you count. The dripping is now a quarter of what it was. You have the potatoes for tonight. You have the remaining bread. You have the oats that are already scraped. You have whatever your father brings home in his pockets tonight, which might be nothing and might be a piece of something. He sometimes brings the end of a loaf from a bakery near the mill that sells old bread to workers, knows which workers have children, gives them the heel sometimes. Might. You go back to the fire and you add a piece of coal. 1 piece. You count. 4 remaining. Wednesday to Friday is 2 days. 4 pieces for 2 days means 2 a day, 1 in the morning and 1 at midday, and the evening fire will have to be managed very carefully. Agnes is watching you from the floor. Was that the baby from down the row? She asks. Yes. Is she poorly? A bit. Agnes considers this with her characteristic gravity. Will she get better? You look at your sister, 6 years old, with her wild hair and her solemn eyes, and her capacity for large questions delivered in small voices. I don't know, you say honestly. Agnes nods. She goes back to her stones. At noon, the mill workers get half an hour. Not all mills, not always. But Sedgwick Mill, where your father works at the carding frames, the machines that comb and align the raw cotton fibres before spinning, Sedgwick gives 30 minutes at noon because the foreman there, a man named Bradshaw, is considered relatively humane by the standards of the trade. Bradshaw does not fine workers for going to the privy. Bradshaw does not lock the gates until the bell rings. Bradshaw has been known to look the other way when a man is 2 minutes late on a bad winter morning. By the standards of the mills, Bradshaw is a saint. By the standards of the world outside the mills, Bradshaw runs a place where 11-year-old boys work 12-hour shifts breathing cotton fluff in 80-degree heat. Both things are true simultaneously. Your father won't come home for dinner. The walk is too long. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, he eats with a group of men near the mill gates, at a place that is not a restaurant and not a shop, but a woman named Agnes Holt, who operates from the ground floor of a terraced house on Ancoat Street, who makes soup and bread for a halfpenny, who's been doing this for 15 years, and whose soup is, by general worker consensus, the best soup available for a halfpenny within walking distance of the mill. You're not sure if your father will go to Agnes Holt's today. You're not sure if he has the halfpenny. Last night he came home and put the week's tally on the table. He's paid on Friday, but the foreman keeps a running count. And the tally had a deduction you weren't expecting. A fine sixpence for a machine stoppage on Monday that the foreman attributed to your father's maintenance negligence, which your father says is wrong, that the fault was a broken part that should have been replaced by the mill and wasn't. Sixpence fined. Sixpence is 8% of his weekly wage. Sixpence is what you paid for this week's coal. Sixpence is the difference between a week that works and a week that doesn't. He hadn't said anything when he put the tally down last night. He'd sat in his chair and looked at the fire, and your mother had looked at the tally and then looked at him and then looked at the fire, and nobody spoke for a while, and then eventually he'd said, "I'll talk to Bradshaw about it," and your mother had said, "Yes," and that was everything that was said. You make tea. Real tea. There is enough left for one pot. A pot that will be weak because you'll use less leaf than you should because it has to last. But real tea, the thing your mother insists on, the small luxury that is not small at all, that is the line drawn between manageable and unbearable. You heat the water, you measure the leaves with your fingers into the small earthenware pot, you pour the water over them, and you wait. The smell of the tea filling the room is something that belongs to a different category of experience than the rest of this morning. It's almost shocking how much of a difference a smell can make. The room is still cold and still small and still has all the same surfaces and all the same weight, but the smell of the tea rises through it, and something in the room and something in your body shifts a fraction toward bearable. You pour a cup for your mother. She wraps her hands around it. You watch her face change. The slight loosening around the eyes, the exhale that is not quite a sigh, the specific and private moment of a woman receiving a small warmth. "Sit with me," she says. You sit on the edge of the bed. Thomas has climbed up too and is asleep against your mother's leg, one hand gripping her dress in his sleep with the purposeful grip of a child who isn't entirely convinced the world will still be where he left it when he wakes up. Agnes is still at her stones, though she has begun building something that appears to be a wall, or a pen for an animal, or an architectural statement of some ambition. "The Booth girl," your mother says. "I know. You did right. We've got enough. We've got enough today," your mother says. Not correcting you exactly, just being precise. "We've got enough today," you agree. A pause. The fire. The tea. Thomas breathing slow and easy. "Your father will sort the fine," your mother says. "He's known Bradshaw 12 years. Bradshaw will hear him out." "Will he reverse it?" Your mother is quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that is doing something, turning a problem over. "He'll hear him out," she says again, which is not the same thing. You drink your tea. It's weak and too hot and there's barely enough, but it's there. And the warmth of it goes down and spreads out, and your hands around the cup feel the heat transfer through the clay. And this ordinary thing, is the thing that holds the morning together, that makes the space between getting up at 4 and getting through the next 8 hours into something survivable. Tell me something, your mother says. What? Anything. Tell me about the street, what you saw. So you tell her. You tell her about the baker, about the woman with the loaf, and the look that passed between you. You describe her coat, the thinness at the elbows. Your mother listens. You tell her about the market, about Mrs. Whitley and the penny halfpenny and the potatoes wrapped in the newspaper, about the corn laws. Your mother makes a sound that is not quite a laugh. The corn laws, she says. Your father went to the meeting. What meeting? The anti-corn Law League. Last month, at the Free Trade Hall, they're all going. The mill workers, she pauses. He came back very stirred up. You consider this image. Your father, stirred up. Your father who comes home from 12 hours at the carding frames and sits in his chair and looks at the fire with an economy of movement that suggests every additional gesture is a luxury he's not sure he can afford. What did he say about it? He said Cobden spoke for an hour and made it all very plain, that the landowners are eating from the same plate as the workers, but the workers don't know it yet. She pauses again. He said there were 3,000 men in that hall, and they were all very quiet and very angry, which he said was different from just being angry, which is nothing. Being quiet and angry, he said, that's when things actually change. Thomas stirs against her leg and doesn't wake. Will it change? You ask. The laws? The League thinks so. Your mother's voice is measured, the voice of a woman who has heard many confident predictions. They said the same thing about the Factory Acts in 33. Took longer than they said and did less than they promised, and things still change somewhat. Somewhat. The Factory Act of 1833 prohibited children under 9 from working in textile mills. It required children 9 to 13 to have 2 hours of schooling a day. It created 4 factory inspectors, 4 for the whole of England, to enforce these rules. 4 inspectors for the whole of England. The mills employed over 1 million workers. Somewhat is the accurate word for what changed. I think it will change, you say. Not optimism exactly, just calculation. The numbers have to change. The math of what it costs to maintain a population that can work in mills is eventually going to force the issue. Men who understand money will eventually understand that dead workers and stunted children are a production problem, not just a moral one, and when it becomes a production problem, the money will move. That's cynical, but it's also probably true. Maybe so, your mother says, in a voice that is reserving judgment. Agnes has completed her wall. She sits back on her heels and regards it. It's a garden, she announces. Very nice, your mother says. Agnes looks at it a moment more. Then she knocks it over with one sweep of her hand and begins again. At 2 o'clock, Mr. Greaves comes. Mr. Greaves is not someone you know well. He's connected to the chapel on every street. Not a minister himself, but what they call a district visitor. A man who goes around the poorer parts of the district calling on families, checking on conditions, bringing occasionally a small basket of things from the charitable fund that the chapel maintains. He's been a few times before. He comes about once a month. He is a thin man in a good coat, maybe 40, with spectacles and the manner of someone who is genuinely trying to do good and has not yet entirely made peace with the gap between his intentions and what he can actually provide. He knocks. You let him in. He looks around the room with the expression you've learned to recognize in visitors from outside the neighborhood. The careful, trained neutrality of someone suppressing a reaction. The room is clean. You cleaned this morning before the laundry, but it is what it is, and it is 8 by 11 feet with 2 beds and a table and a fire and a bucket and the smell of coal smoke and damp wool and the faint ghost of this morning's porridge. Good afternoon, he says, in the overly formal way of someone who is compensating for awkwardness with formality. Mrs. Your mother is well? Resting, you say. Your mother from the bed raises a hand in acknowledgement. He sets his basket on the table. You look at the basket. A piece of salt pork wrapped in cloth. A small jar of something dark. Treacle, you think. A piece of cheese. Some dried peas in a cloth bag. A card of some kind printed. From the chapel fund, he says. Thank you, your mother says from the bed. You look at the pork. Your mind has already begun working with it. The pork can be boiled with the dried peas tonight. The broth will make a proper meal. The remainder of the meat can be stretched across 2 more days. The dripping from the boiling. You stop yourself. Later. You'll think it through later. I wanted to ask, Mr. Greaves says, and his voice shifts slightly, the formal shell cracking open on something more direct. About the conditions on the street. There's a man from the Municipal Improvement Committee who's coming to the district next week taking evidence for a report. A report, your mother says, on sanitary conditions, housing, water supply. Following on from Mr. Chadwick's report last year, they're looking at specific streets. Angel Meadow will be included. A pause. What do they do with the report, you ask? Greaves looks at you. He seems slightly surprised that you have asked, or perhaps surprised at the directness of the question, which is a question that cuts straight past the performance of gratitude and inquiry and asks the only thing that actually matters. They present it to the council, he says, and to Parliament eventually. It builds the case for... The same as Chadwick's report, you say. Yes. The same process. Yes. And in the meantime, the water pump at the end of our entry serves 8 households and smells the way it smells, and we've had 2 families take sick from it in the last year. Greaves looks at you. His expression is complicated. Not offended, he's too decent for that, but not comfortable either. He's a man who believes in gradual reform through proper channels, and you're a 17-year-old girl in a damp dress pointing out that the proper channels have a particular timeline, and the sick children don't keep to timelines. Yes, he says, that's why the report is necessary. I know, you say. I'm just telling you what the report should say. Your mother is making a small sound from the bed that might be a cough, or might be a warning, or might be a suppressed laugh. Impossible to tell. Greaves looks at the room, at the window with its frost rim, at the gap under the door stuffed with rags, at the laundry still damp over the back of the chair. I'll note it, he says. He takes a small notebook from his coat pocket and a pencil stub, and he writes something bending over the table. 8 households to the pump, you said? 8 households and the cellar dwellings, you say. If you count those, it's more like 12, he writes. And the privy, you say. 1 privy for the whole row. 9 households, sometimes more. It's cleaned out on Tuesdays, on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Yes, he says. He's writing fast now. I understand. I don't think the report will, you say. I think a man who sleeps somewhere with his own privy and reads about 1 shared privy for 9 households will write something accurate and feel something theoretical. I don't think he'll know what it smells like at the end of a week when the wind is from the south. Greaves looks up. You look back at him. He closes his notebook. You should speak to the committee yourself, he says. When they come next week, they're taking testimony from working women, you say? A pause? Yes, he says, from residents of the district, of all kinds. You think about this. A committee of men, probably in some building in the better part of Manchester, somewhere clean and warm, taking notes with good pencils in good notebooks while people from Angel Meadow explain what Angel Meadow is like. You think about Mary Booth's child, the unfocused eyes, the thin wrists. What day, you ask? Your father comes home at 7:30. You hear him before you see him. The shuffle step on the entry, the particular rhythm of it, the slight drag on the left that has been there since a cartload of bales fell wrong in the loading yard 3 winters ago and bruised something in his hip that never entirely healed. Then the latch, then the door. He's in his working clothes still, the heavy canvas jacket with the cotton fluff worked into the weave, the flat cap, the trousers that are the colour of everything combined, coal and oil and the grey of the mill floor. His face is grey too, in the way that's become usual, though tonight there's more colour in his cheeks than you like, a heat that sits high on the cheekbones and has nothing to do with the fire. The cough comes before he's across the threshold. Not one cough, a sequence of them, low and wet, the kind that starts in the chest and works upward, and he presses his fist against his mouth and waits it out, standing in the doorway with the cold air coming in around him. Agnes runs to him. Papa. He picks her up with the arm that isn't pressed to his face, lifts her in one motion and holds her against his chest. The cough has passed. He closes the door. Evening. He says, "Evening?" your mother says from the bed. He looks at her. She looks at him. There is a conversation in this, a rapid, wordless exchange of the kind that happens between people who've been married for 19 years and have learned each other's faces the way you learn a street, every irregular surface memorized, every shade of expression readable in a second. He sets Agnes down. Bradshaw, your mother says. Heard me out, your father says. He takes off his jacket and hangs it on the hook by the door. He is a thin man, thinner than he used to be. You've noticed this over the past year, the way the jacket fits differently, the slight concavity of his temples that wasn't there before. The cough is eating him from somewhere inside, consuming a resource that isn't being replaced because the food is what it is, and the hours are what they are, and the cotton fluff is in the air of the carding room for 12 hours every day. He's looking into it. He said he'd speak to the machine foreman. Did he say he'd reverse the fine? A pause. He said he'd look into it. Your mother says nothing. Your father sits in his chair. He looks at the fire. His face in profile has the quality of a hill seen in bad light, something that used to have distinct features which are now smoothed by distance or darkness into a single continuous shape. There's supper, you say. He turns a look at you. His eyes focus as if you've appeared from some internal distance. Good girl, he says. The salt pork from Greaves's basket is on the fire, has been on the fire for 3 hours, simmering with the dried peas in a quantity of water that will become broth. By the time your father sits down, the room has changed. The smell of boiling pork has replaced everything else in the room, the coal smoke and the damp wool and the ambient cold, and has become the room, has made this small space for an hour into something that smells, not quite deceptively like adequacy, like provision, like a kitchen that knows what it's doing. It's not a complicated dish, it's barely a recipe. Pork and peas in water with salt, simmered until the peas are soft and the meat has given everything it can to the broth. and the broth is thick and grey-brown and smells of something animal and savoury that is in the oldest register of what food means. You ladle it out. The bowls again. The same 4 bowls, rotation. Your father gets the biggest portion first, and then your mother, and then a bowl shared between William and John, who have come home in the last half hour in their own layers of mill smell and spent silence, and a bowl between Agnes and Thomas. You have whatever remains. The peas are still slightly firm at the centre. The pork is stringy and tough. Salt pork from the charitable basket is not tender pork. It's the preserved end of whatever was available, worked hard before it was slaughtered, salted down to keep it, carrying the texture of both lives in its fibres. But you can pull it apart with a spoon, can work through it methodically, and the broth it's made has substance to it, has a quality that coats the spoon and the inside of your mouth with something that is, in its own honest terms, nourishing. William eats without talking. He's been doing this for a month. The silence at the end of his work days has been deepening, the hours absorbing something that used to come back by evening, and now takes longer to return. He's 11. You watch him eat, and you think about the committee next week about Greaves's notebook. John talks. He always talks. He tells an elaborate story about something that happened at the school today, involving a boy called Hewitt and a piece of chalk and a misunderstanding that apparently ended with both of them being made to stand in the corner, though the story John tells makes it very clear that the misunderstanding was Hewitt's fault, and the chalk was also Hewitt's fault, and John's presence in the corner was a miscarriage of justice so flagrant it barely merits describing, but he will describe it at length. Agnes eats and listens to John and laughs at the Hewitt story without fully understanding it. Thomas eats with his face 6 inches from the bowl, both arms encircling it in a protective semicircle, which is the posture of a child who is absorbed without anyone explaining it, that food is something to be guarded. Your father eats slowly, slower than usual. He's not tasting exactly. He's eating because eating is the next thing after sitting, is the necessary thing, is what you do when food is in front of you. His cheeks are still high-coloured. When he coughs between spoonfuls, the sound is different than it was last week. Wetter, more effort to it. Your mother watches him across the table. Later, when the children are in bed and the fire is low and you're washing the bowls in the last of the water, she says quietly from the bed, "He needs to see someone." "I know," you say. "Mrs. Thomas's husband went to the dispensary on Swan Street." "I know. It doesn't cost much. If he's a subscriber through the mill." "I'll ask him tomorrow morning," you say. A pause. "Ask him tonight," your mother says. You ask him tonight. He's in his chair. The fire is lower now, the coal you added at supper burning down to a red-orange bed of embers. Everyone else is in bed or nearly. The room is as quiet as this room gets, which is not very quiet. Agnes murmuring to herself in her sleep, the distant sound of the street, the building's constant repertoire of creaks and settlings. You sit on the stool across from him. He looks at you. He knows you, specifically, well enough to know that when you sit like this, not busy, not moving, just present, you have something you've decided to say. "Swan Street Dispensary," you say. "You're a subscriber through Sedgwick?" He takes a moment. "I am." Then it's covered, the consultation. He looks at the fire. "Your chest," you say. "It's worse this week." "It's the weather." "It's been the weather since October." A pause. "Your father," he says, meaning his own father, meaning your grandfather who you never met, who worked in a coal mine in Yorkshire and died at 42 of a thing his family called the black lung, and that the men who studied such things called pneumoconiosis. Your father's father had a cough. I know, you say, and his father before him. I know. He's quiet. The cotton fluff isn't coal dust, you say. Dr. Roberton wrote about it. The fluff in the garden rooms, it gets in the lungs, but it's different. Some men work with it 30 years, some don't. Your father looks at you. Where did you read that? He asks. Greaves leaves pamphlets. A long pause. The fire settles. A small collapse of the coal bed. A shower of red sparks rising and dying in the grate. I'll go on Friday, he says. Thursday, you say. He almost smiles. It's a very small, almost smile, visible only at the corner of his mouth. A muscle movement so slight it barely counts, and yet it counts completely. Thursday, he says. You stand. You fold your hands together. There's nothing else to say tonight that can be said usefully. Good night, you say. Good night, girl, he says. His version of your name is this. Not your name, just girl, said in a particular tone that is not diminishment but the opposite. The particular emphasis of a man who's not easy with expressions of feeling and has condensed a great deal of it into one ordinary word. You go to your pallet on the floor. The floor. You know this floor, every plank of it. The one near the wall that gives a half second before taking your weight, a slight flex and settle that you've compensated for so long it's automatic. The rough section near the bucket where the grain of the wood has lifted and would catch on bare skin if you dragged your foot. The flat, smooth middle section, worn to a dull shine by 20 years of feet. You lie down. The straw in the mattress has compressed over months into something more like a layer of suggestion, a theory of cushioning that the floor beneath contests. You shift onto your side. The fire is almost out now, just the glow, and the room is dark and cold and occupied with the sounds of sleeping people. You are, tonight, not immediately tired. This happens. Some nights the exhaustion takes you down within minutes, your body deciding on your behalf that consciousness is no longer required. Other nights your mind runs, going through the accounting of the day, the unsettled questions, the things that happened that haven't finished happening inside you yet. Tonight it runs, the baby from number 7. You don't know if she ate the dripping, you don't know if she's better or worse. Tomorrow you might find out or you might not, because this is the texture of life in this neighbourhood. People appear in your doorway with needs and then disappear back into their own lives, and you don't always get the resolution. It's not like a story. It's not tidy. Mary Booth's husband works the night shift at a bleaching works near Strangeways. Night shift pays a little more. It means he's not home at night. It means Mary manages everything alone, which she does and has done and will continue to do, because what's the alternative? The alternatives are all worse. You think about the committee coming next week. Greaves's surprised face when you asked what the report would do. The question, you think, is not rhetorical. Or rather, you asked it rhetorically to make a point, but there's a version of the question that isn't. There's a version that is sincere and wants to know. Because you are 17 years old in 1843 in Manchester, and you have access to Greaves's pamphlets, and to whatever newspapers get wrapped around your potatoes, and you have been watching the shape of the arguments, the Corn Laws, the Factory Acts, the Sanitary Reform Movement, the dispensaries, and you can see, if you look at it a certain way, that something is changing, not fast. Nothing about this is fast. But in 1815, when the Corn Laws were passed, There were no factory inspectors at all. None. Children worked from the age of 4 with no protection and no recourse. The Reform Act of 1832 was unthinkable in 1820. Chadwick's report existed where no report had existed before. The changes are too slow to feel like changes when you're inside them. When you're the person who got up at 4 this morning and cut the mould off the bread and carried the bucket from the pump, the abstractions of parliamentary reform are very abstract indeed. But they're there. They're moving. Something is moving. You close your eyes. Time does something after that. It doesn't stop. It never stops. That would be a mercy. You pause to gather yourself. It just continues. The way the city continues, the way the mills continue, the way the bells continue their marking of hours that arrive before you're ready for them. December comes in like a threat made good. The temperature drops past anything November managed. The water bucket freezes overnight now, not a thin skin of ice, but solid, 4 inches deep, requiring the heel of your hand and a sustained impact to break through. The frost on the window is not a rim, but a covering, white and fern-like, patterns made by the cold that would be beautiful if beauty were the thing you needed at 4 in the morning. The coal question becomes more severe. Your father's fine was partially reversed. Bradshaw spoke to the machine foreman and accepted that the fault was a worn gear that should have been replaced, and gave back 4 pence of the 6pence. 4 pence back, 2 pence gone forever into the mill's accounting. These are the numbers of a life. He went to the dispensary on Thursday. The doctor there, a young man, newer to the practice, with the slightly earnest quality of someone still close to the reasons they decided to do this work, listened to his chest with an ear trumpet and then with a new thing, a stethoscope, a wooden tube with an ivory earpiece that was invented 30 years ago and is still not universal but is in use at the Swan Street dispensary. The doctor said, "Rest when you can," which was said in the tone of a man who knows he's recommending something unlikely. He prescribed a linctus, a syrup of horehound and honey, and something else, dispensed in a small green bottle, and said to return in a month. The linctus cost 3pence. 3pence is a day's worth of decisions, agonizing and compressed into a single coin. You spend the 3pence. You do not discuss whether to spend it. The linctus does not cure the cough, but it does something, softens the edges of it, slightly, makes the morning slightly less violent, gives your father enough relief that he sleeps better, which means he works better, which is the actual calculation. The 3pence pays for itself if it keeps him at the carding frames. Christmas comes. Christmas in this neighbourhood is not what Christmas is in the other parts of Manchester. The mill owners who live in the new suburbs out toward Cheetham Hill have parlours with fires and tables with things on them, and a kind of excess that is reported in the newspapers as normal, as the natural expression of the season, as what Christmas looks like. What Christmas looks like in this row of back-to-backs is a slightly larger piece of meat from the charitable fund, a small packet of dried fruit that your mother has been saving since November. The dried currants bought 1 ounce at a time over 6 weeks and kept in a cloth in the wooden box, accumulating toward a Christmas pudding that is approximately 1/4 of the size it would be in the other Manchester, but that fills the room when it cooks, with a smell so dense and sweet it almost changes the texture of the air. You make the pudding together, you and your mother. Her hands are slower now. The baby is 7 months. She's heavy. She moves with the deliberate care of a woman managing a weight that is distributed across her whole body and must be accounted for in every action. But she stands at the table and works the sweet into the flour with her fingers, the gesture automatic, the motion of someone who has made this pudding every year for 20 years. More fruit, you say. That's all the fruit. There's a bit more in the cloth. She looks at you. Is there? You put the last of the currants in. She sees what you did and she doesn't say anything, but she presses the mixture together with her palms, and the expression on her face is something that is not quite what you'd call happiness, but is in the same family. January, the worst month. In January, the bills from before Christmas arrive, which is not something that applies to you because you don't have the kind of economic life that generates bills in advance of Christmas. You have the kind that generates insufficiency continuously and uniformly. But January brings its own particular difficulty. It is the month when everything tightens, when the wages that were barely enough in October and November are confronted with the coldest weather of the year, and coal costs more because everyone needs it, and the market adjusts accordingly. A penny more per hundredweight. A penny doesn't sound like much. A penny per hundredweight of coal, multiplied over a winter's worth of coal, is the difference between a fire that heats the room and a fire that merely proves that fire exists. February is cold and wet, and your father's cough is worse again, the linctus running out, and you go back to the dispensary yourself this time, with the empty bottle and the sixpence you've saved, carefully, painfully saved, the sixpence in the knotted cloth in your pocket, not to be spent on bread or coal or potatoes, the one ring-fence thing. And you get the refill and you come home and you give it to him, and he doesn't ask where you got the money and you don't tell him. And then the baby comes on a Tuesday in the second week of March, in the way that babies have always come in rooms like this, with the midwife, with hot water, with the ordinary and extraordinary combination of work and pain, and the particular sound that a woman makes in labour that is unlike any other sound in human experience. You and Agnes and Thomas and John are sent out. William is already at work. It's 5 in the morning when it starts, and by 6 Agnes and Thomas are wrapped in their coats, and you have John by the hand, and you are in the entry, all 4 of you, in the cold March air that smells of thaw and wet earth, for the first time in months, a quality of air that is not summer, but is the idea of summer beginning to form at the edges. You sit in the entry. Agnes sits next to you. She has brought one of her stones, a smooth grey one, and she turns it in her fingers. Thomas sits on your other side. John is on his feet, unable to be still, pacing the length of the entry and back. The sounds from inside are muffled. You are not afraid exactly. You've been through this before. Thomas was born in this room. You were 11. You remember the night. But that was 6 years ago, and you were small enough then that the adults around you absorbed some of the weight of it. Now you're the adult. Not officially, not in any way that anyone has named or acknowledged, but in every practical sense, sitting in this entry with 3 children in the cold March morning, waiting. It takes 2 hours. The midwife opens the door. She's a stout woman, Mrs. Corrigan, who's been delivering babies in this district for 30 years, and her face when she opens the door is a face that has learned to be professionally neutral while carrying information that goes in one of 2 directions. The direction she's carrying today is good. A girl, she says. Both well. Both well. Both well. You stand up from where you've been sitting for 2 hours and your legs are cold and stiff, and you press your hand against the wall to steady yourself for a moment. Agnes. A girl? A girl, you say. Agnes considers this with immense gravity. Then, good. You go inside. The baby is very small. You know babies are small. You have known several babies. But this smallness is specific and startling every time. The way this quantity of person, this entire separate human being, fits in the crook of your mother's arm with room to spare, the fingers curled, the face still carrying the compressed expression of someone who has just come from somewhere very different and hasn't quite updated their expression yet. The baby's name will be Catherine, after your father's mother. Your mother is tired, more tired than you've seen her, not ill, not in danger, just hollowed out by the specific labour of producing another person from your own body, which is an enormous physical task that the word tired inadequately describes. She's lying in the bed with the baby against her side and her eyes open, and the expression of someone in a state that is not sleep and not waking, but a third thing, the profound, alert vacancy of absolute physical spentness. You take care of the room. You make tea. You bring it to your mother and she drinks it with one hand, the other arm holding the baby, the tea going into her in long, grateful sips that you can see working on her from the outside, the colour coming back slowly to her face. You make porridge for Agnes and Thomas and John, who has come back in and is standing near the bed with an expression of complex fascination directed at the baby. She's very small, he says. All babies are, you say. She looks like a potato, he says, with the considered judgment of an 8-year-old delivering a fair assessment. John, you say. A very nice potato, he says. Your mother laughs. It's a real laugh, surprised out of her. Short and quiet, and then it dissolves into something that is briefly, just briefly, something else, the laugh becoming adjacent to tears and then receding, and she blinks and holds the baby closer and is fine. A very nice potato, she agrees. The committee came in November. You gave testimony. You stood in a room, not as large or grand as you'd imagined, just a meeting room above a solicitor's office on Deansgate, with 3 men behind a long table and another man taking notes, and you spoke for 12 minutes. You told them about the pump, about the 8 households and the cellar dwellings, about the privy, about the smell on the days the wind came from the south. You told them about the bread because they asked about diet, about food, about what people in the district actually ate. You told them about the dripping, about the mould, about the mathematics of a morning on which the bread runs out, and the question of whether what remains is edible or isn't is the question that determines whether children eat. One of the men, older, heavy, the kind of face that has been comfortable for a long time, looked at you with an expression you had seen before, the expression of a man who knows the information and is none the less surprised that you also know the information and can articulate it. He said, "And you are how old?" 17, you said. A pause. And you manage the household. Yes. Your mother is pregnant, you said. Now delivered. She has a new daughter. He wrote something down. The second man, younger, asked you about the cotton fluff, about your father's cough, about the dispensary on Swan Street and whether workers generally knew it existed and could access it. You answered him precisely. The third man said nothing the entire time. He just took notes. When you left, Greaves was waiting in the corridor. He looked at you with an expression you couldn't quite pass. Well, he said. Well, you agreed. You told them about the dripping. They asked about food. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I've been doing district visits for 6 years. Most women apologise before they start, say they don't know much, they're just a housewife, they don't have education. Then they tell me the same things you just told those men, except they take 20 minutes longer and leave out the specific numbers. You looked at him. The specific numbers help, he said. The 8 households, the half-inch crack that lets in cold air, the penny and a half at the baker's. He paused. If they're going to change anything, they need the numbers. Will they change anything, you asked? This time the question was not rhetorical. Greaves thought about this for a long time, in the corridor above the solicitor's office on Deansgate, while the street noise of Manchester came up through the floorboards. Yes, he said. I believe they will. Some things. Eventually. Some things. Eventually. The same as your mother said about the Factory Acts. Not nothing. Not nothing. 3 years later, in 1846, the Corn Laws are repealed. You read about it in a newspaper that someone has used to wrap your potatoes at the market. The paper is 3 days old. That's how news travels to this part of Manchester. And the headline is large enough that you stop on the way home and read it standing at the side of the road, with the parcel of potatoes under your arm and a thin rain beginning. The Corn Laws are gone. The tariffs are finished. Grain from America, from Eastern Europe, from anywhere in the world, can now enter Britain without the artificial price inflation that has kept bread expensive for 30 years. The effects won't be immediate. The price of bread doesn't fall overnight. It falls slowly, over years, as the markets adjust and the supply chains change and the economics of grain work their way through to the price of the quartern loaf at Thomas Hemming's bakery. But it falls. 3 years after the repeal, a full pound loaf, the kind of loaf that cost 4p halfpenny in 1843 or has cost 3p, a halfpenny. That's what political change looks like when you're living at the level of the bread. A halfpenny, invisible in the accounts of the merchants, life-altering in the accounts of the families on Angel Meadow. The Mines Act of 1842 had already prohibited women and children under 10 from working underground in coal mines. The Factory Act of 1844 reduced the working hours for women and children further and required fencing on dangerous machinery. The Public Health Act of 1848 will create local boards of health and begin the process, slow, contested, imperfect, of forcing local authorities to take responsibility for water supply and sewage. None of these things happen quickly. All of them are fought by the people whose money depends on the old arrangements. All of them arrive incomplete, with gaps and exemptions and inadequate enforcement mechanisms. But they arrive. Your father's cough. He lives with it for 6 more years. In 1849, the cholera comes to Manchester for the 3rd time. There were outbreaks in 1832 and 1833. And your father is sick for 2 weeks in August of 1849, sick enough that you think you will lose him, that the wet coughing nights and the fever will combine into something that can't be come back from. He comes back from it, not entirely well, not what he was, but alive, which is what matters, which is the only accounting that counts. The baby, Catherine. She is sturdy. The word people use about her, almost from the start, is sturdy. Not beautiful, not delicate, not any of the adjective applied to children of families who have more margin for beauty. Sturdy. She eats well and grows quickly and has your mother's dark eyes and your father's jaw and an absolute fearlessness that belongs perhaps to a child who has never been given a reason to think the world will accommodate her. She will need that. The world will not accommodate her. But she has it. William. He's a journeyman spinner by 19, a skilled worker, earning 15 shillings a week. Not rich, not comfortable in any way that the word comfortable means to most people reading this. But 15 shillings is a different mathematics from 9. 15 shillings is the difference between mould on the bread and mould on the bread less often. Agnes goes to the charity school until she's 12. The school teaches her to read properly. Not the basic recognition your mother manages, but actual reading. The kind where you can take a newspaper apart and understand what it's doing. She reads, in 1851, about the great exhibition at the Crystal Palace in London, a vast hall of glass and iron, the size of several cathedrals, filled with the industrial products of Britain and the world. She reads about it, and she tells you about what she reads, and you listen, standing at the fire, stirring something, and you think, I gave her the roll instead of the bread, and she read about the Crystal Palace. It's not a transaction. It's not cause and effect in any clean way. But it's something. The street. The entry. The smell of the pump at the end of the row. These things are slower. The municipal water supply, clean water, filtered water, water that comes through pipes rather than out of the River Irk via a cast iron pump, reaches Angel Meadow in stages through the 1850s. It reaches some streets first and others later, and some not fully for a decade more. And in between there is the slow, contested process of infrastructure. Pipes that burst, connections that don't get made, the indifference of a city administration still learning that infrastructure is not optional if you want people to remain alive. The cellar dwellings persist. You would like to report that they're abolished, that the housing reform movement sweeps them away in a single decisive act, and the families living 6 feet below street level in damp rooms without proper windows are relocated to something better. That isn't what happens. What happens is slower and more grinding. A bylaw here, an inspection regime there, some sellers condemned and some landlords fined, and the slow shift of economic conditions that eventually makes it more profitable to build proper housing than to rent cellars. The people who live in those cellars in the meantime, you know them. The woman with the scar on her neck, the man whose wife died in August, they stay in the cellars and survive or don't. This is the thing that the reports, the committees, the parliamentary debates, the reformers with their pamphlets and their notebooks. This is the thing they don't entirely capture, that you know from the inside. That the gap between a law being passed and a life being changed is measured in years, sometimes decades, and in that gap people live or die according to conditions that the law has not yet reached. You give testimony to the committee in 1843. You give testimony to another committee in 1847, by which time you are 21, and have a more sophisticated understanding of what testimony does and doesn't accomplish. And you say more and say it more efficiently, and the committee writes it down and nods, and the changes that follow are the same kind. Partial, eventual, real. Real. That last word matters. You've decided it matters, but that's all later. Tonight is 1843. Tonight is this room, this cold, this fire that has gone to red embers, this darkness that is the darkness of a city that uses tallow candles and coal fires rather than gas lamps in the streets of the poorer neighbourhoods, a darkness that has weight. Your pallet on the floor, the straw mattress is still the straw mattress, still presses the floor upward against your hip when you lie on your side, still lets the cold come through. still smells faintly of all the nights you've spent on it, of straw and coal dust and the faint human warmth of your own body. You pull the blanket up, your hands on the blanket, red at the knuckles, rough at the palms, the nails short and slightly broken at the edges from the morning's work and the afternoon's work and everything you have put your hands to today. These are your hands. You've had them all your life, and they are already the hands of someone who works. Not the hands you might have had in a different life, in a different house, in a different postcode that doesn't exist yet because postcodes haven't been invented. These hands, the ones that carried the bucket, cut the bread, spread the dripping, made the porridge, wrung out the laundry, stirred the pot, handed the roll to the woman in the baker's, counted the coal. You close them. The fire is nearly out now. Just the glow, deep orange, a small persistent heart of warmth that will be ash by morning. You'll build it again. You already know the sequence. Kneel, find the kindling, find the flint, the steel, the tinder, the strike, the spark on the char cloth, the breath, slow and steady, the flame. You know it the way you know the 6 steps to the fire, the way you know the weight of a full bucket versus a half-full one, the way you know which corner of the bread goes bad first and how deep to cut and when enough is enough and when it isn't. This knowledge is not the knowledge that gets written down, not in Chadwick's report, not in the committee minutes, not in the pamphlets Greaves leaves. The knowledge that gets written down is facts and figures. 12,000 people per square mile, 1 privy per 9 households, average age of death 28 years. The knowledge that doesn't get written down is the exact pressure needed to coax a fire from a single surviving ember at 4 in the morning when the coal is almost gone. The way a child's face changes when there is food and when there isn't. The feel of cold water in your palm and what it means to carry it back through the dark. This knowledge lives in the hands, in the body, in the specific weight of a morning that begins before light and asks everything of you and which you meet, again and again, because meeting it is the only available option. And because somewhere in the meeting of it there is something that is not quite dignity and not quite pride, but is in the same family as both. Agnes is breathing slow. Thomas is still. His hand, which always grips in sleep, is open now. The night has relaxed it, the small fingers uncurled on the blanket. Your mother's breathing has changed into the long measured rhythm of deep sleep, and underneath it, so small you might be imagining it, the baby's breath, quick and even, quick and even. Your father coughs once quietly in his sleep, then stillness. William, John, in the other bed, everyone in, everyone breathing. This is the inventory you take without knowing you're taking it. The nightly accounting of all the people in this room, the sound check, the slow cross-referencing of breath against presence. Not worry, just knowledge. The same category as knowing the 6 steps to the fire and the depth of the water in the bucket. You know where everyone is. Everyone is here. The sounds of the street continue outside, they always do. A cart somewhere on Rochdale Road. Wheels on the cobbles. A voice, distant, carrying, the particular projection of someone calling to someone across a distance. The dog that lives in the stable yard at the end of the block, its bark low and periodic, establishing something. Manchester is not quiet at any hour, but the quality of its sound changes at this hour. The daylight sounds, the vendors and the horses and the mill bells and the sharp, purposeful noise of commerce and transit and the 1,000 urgent small transactions of the city, those have faded. What remains is the deeper sound, the sound that was here before the mills, that will be here in some form after them, the sound of a large number of people in close proximity to each other, alive, continuing. 500,000 people. 500,000 people in this city, in these streets, in rooms like this room, and rooms much smaller, and rooms much larger, all of them lying down right now, or sitting by fires, or walking home through the dark, all of them with their specific calculations and their specific foods and their specific worn-down heels on their specific shoes, all of them breathing. It is a strange thing to know. It is the thing that is almost too large to hold. The sheer ordinary volume of human life, the density of it in this city at this moment in history, which is a moment. You know this from Greaves's pamphlets, from the newspapers around your potatoes, that people will look back on, that this city, these streets, this time, are the furnace in which something is being made, that the mills and the cotton and the coal and the people pressed together in the back-to-back terraces, and the children in the rag shops, and the coughs and the cholera, and the hungry mornings and the long shifts, and the committees and the reports, and the halfpenny difference in the price of bread, that all of this is something, not something simple, not something that'll be remembered as good exactly in all its specific textures, but something that matters, that is happening, that people will try to understand, will argue about, will draw different conclusions from, for a long time. You are inside it. You're not a footnote. You're the thing itself. You close your eyes. Centuries will pass. The street you know, Angel Meadow, the back-to-back terraces, the entry with its frozen mud, the pump at the end of the row, will change beyond recognition. The terraces will be condemned, pulled down, replaced with something else, then something else again. The city rebuilding itself over its own foundations with the restless energy of a place that has never entirely learned to be still. The mills will close, not immediately, not soon, but eventually, over the long arc of the 20th century, the cotton trade will move to India, to America, to wherever labour is cheaper, which is a sentence that is already writing itself in the economics of 1843, though nobody in this room is positioned to see it. The river will be cleaned, the water will come through pipes, the children will not work in the mills. These things will happen. People will still live in Manchester, will still wake up early, will still stand in front of fires, different fires, electric fires, central heating, and still make the first calculations of the day, the inventory of what there is and what there isn't, the accounting of sufficiency. Some mornings it adds up and some mornings it doesn't. That doesn't change. The particulars change. The bread is different. The fires are different. The tools of poverty are different. They involve now different paperwork, different systems, different humiliations and different dignities. But the 4 o'clock morning, the cold that rises from the floor, the question of what's in the larder, the calibration of enough. Someone is doing this right now, not in this room, not in this city, maybe not in this country, but somewhere. Someone is awake at 4 a.m. counting. Someone is at a fire, or at a stove, or at a hot plate, or at whatever the fire has become, making something from the available components that will carry a family through a morning. The knowledge in the hands is the same. The weight of the question is the same, and the answer, make do, go out, cut the mould back, ask the neighbour, give the roll to the woman with the coat at the elbows, count the coal. The answer is the same too. You make it work, again, and then again. That's the whole story. The sounds are fading now, or you're letting them go. The same sounds, becoming less insistent. The cart on Rochdale Road, still there, receding. The dog, still barking, slower. The city's continuous murmur, present, but softening at the edges, blurring into something more uniform, less specific. This is the threshold. You know it. The place where the mind stops keeping track, stops filing things away under today's date, stops running the next morning's calculations. Let them go. They'll be there when you need them. The 6 steps to the fire, the kindling, the flint, the slow breath. All of it will be there, waiting, ready to be picked up again when the bells ring. Not yet. For now, there is just this. The floor under you. Firm, cold, known. Yours. The blanket. Thin, slightly rough, smelling of sleep and wood smoke and the room itself. Familiar in the way that only objects you have lived alongside become familiar. Not precious, not beautiful, just undeniably present. Your hands unclenched now, the knuckles unknotting, the muscles of the palms releasing the grip they hold all day, the grip of the bucket handle and the wooden spoon and the knife and the mangle and the coal box, releasing it slowly the way the morning releases into day, giving up the tension by degrees. Your mother's breathing, Agnes, slow. Thomas, open-handed. The baby, new and small, quick and even. Quick and even. Everyone here, everyone breathing. It's enough. You're warm enough, tired enough, safe enough. For this hour, for this night. That's all nights ever are. This night, this hour, this room, this breathing. Let the city continue outside. Let the mill bells wait for morning. Let the cold air press against the window with the frost patterns you'll break through before dawn. For now there is just the drift. The long, slow, utterly ordinary descent into rest that has been waiting for you since you opened your eyes in the dark at 4 this morning and found the fire out and began. Let it come. Let the sounds soften. Let the room go. You've earned it. Every piece of coal counted, every slice of bread cut, every bowl served, every bucket carried, every cold water morning endured, every small decision made correctly or close enough. You've earned this rest. Take it. The last thing is the fire. The faint glow of the last coal, the deep orange pulse of it visible even through closed eyelids, a warmth that is more warmth now in the imagination than in the room, but is no less real for that. It will be ash by morning. You'll build it again. But that's morning, and morning is not now. Now is this, just this. The whole city breathing in the dark, the bells already wound for 5 o'clock, the kettle waiting, the fire waiting, the bread waiting, all of it patient, waiting for you. Not yet. Rest. Good night.